This is a testing track for light armored vehicles in London, Ontario. Why are we here? Well, that's because this country needs to have a conversation about defense. Canada has committed to spending billions of new money on defense by the end of fiscal. How do you spend that much money that quickly? What do you spend it on? Do you spend it on more light armored vehicles? Talking about dollars and defense is coming up.
Government must start fulfilling its most fundamental role.
Canada's Prime Minister made a promise.
Defend Canadians.
This country will spend an extra $8.7 billion on defense by the end of March.
We believe that the CAF has the latest in technology.
No wonder defense contractors here are eager to show off what's for sale.
What you see there is the body of the satellite.
It enables you to do a mission rehearsal without having to fly.
It's a lot of money to spend quickly and wisely, and for this industry, hoping to cash in on some of it, it's a very big deal.
I was at work and it was like, wow.
After 30 years of trying to struggle to get people to pay attention to the Canadian Defence Industrial Base, I didn't really expect it.
To me, that's been the most notable thing of Mr. Carney's time in office.
Effectively, Canada is now in an arms race, kicked off with a June 9th announcement.
I'm announcing today that Canada will achieve NATO's 2% of GDP target this year, half a decade ahead of schedule.
Moving fast now seems Carney's answer to decades of moving slowly on defense. Yes, on occasion, like the war in Afghanistan, Canada has injected some money into defense, but not a lot, and certainly not for a long time. Consider this. In 2023, Canada was thought to be the only NATO country that was failing to meet both critical spending targets, spending 2% of GDP on defense and making sure 20% of that spending was on research, development, and equipment. So Mark Carney is promising Canada will hit those targets and go even further, hitting 5% of GDP on defense by 2035. That is a promise quite possibly easier said than done.
Spending 2% of GDP.
That is certainly the caution from David Perry, a military expert who spent his entire career looking at defense spending.
Canada's got farther to catch up to get to an overall share of our economy spending on defense than a lot of our allies do.
Our house needs more repairs?
Absolutely. The roof leaks, the basement floods, the wiring's old, and the plumbing needs to be updated. Other countries are doing one or two or a few of those things and putting on an addition. We're kind of doing everything at once, in part because we didn't fix anything for about 25, 30 years.
Here's the reality of that house in disrepair. As a start, Canada needs new warships, new submarines, new coastal defense vessels, new fighter aircraft, new surveillance aircraft, and don't forget new recruits. The Canadian forces are short as many as 14,000 members, especially worrying that some new recruits are leaving in part because they complain of lengthy delays in getting trained.
So we'll put it over the eyes first.
Okay.
So you should be able to see your surroundings and everything.
Precisely a problem the Ottawa-based defense contractor Calian is trying to help solve.
If you take your fist out and rotate it, you can actually change the direction that you're looking at the ships from. Then you can drop down in and be any of the team members that are going to be part of this.
This virtual reality program could rapidly train huge numbers of sailors to refuel ships at sea. We're in a moment where the ambition is to hire more people, to spend more money, to do it quickly. How does this feed into that?
Yeah, you're able to train a lot more people. So the goggles themselves are really not that expensive. You can then have many more people working this virtual reality in training so that when you're able to shorten the training times.
Jay Ballard, once a fighter pilot, is a vice president at Calian.
This is how you train like you're going to fight. You're using the system that you're going to use when you're deployed.
Says industry-wide Canadian defense contracts have been good but inconsistent, and that has made many firms nervous about their futures here.
Because Canada didn't spend as much money post-Afghanistan to align with NATO goals, the defense industry looks at that and goes, well, there's not as much revenue possible here. So a lot of companies either decreased their size or moved out.
That means the decision for defense companies to stay put in Canada has risks. So it's always a gamble.
Yep. Well, for instance, the Land Vehicle Crew Training System contract that we just finally submitted a bid. We're teamed with another company to do that. We've been tracking that for 17 years. If you pay a team to stay ready for that, you're investing in that, and nothing's happening, there's no revenue associated with it, it is a sunken cost that just continues to rise.
To suddenly trust that Canada is about to keep its promise may require a leap of faith from contractors. What they do not doubt is the motivation to spend.
If they don't pay, I'm not going to defend them. No, I'm not going to defend them.
The U.S. president has made the consequences of not doing so perfectly clear. That makes this a matter of survival as a country and an economy. The Prime Minister getting even more bold with his spending announcement, committing to it being a job creator in Canada.
We will ensure that every dollar is invested wisely, prioritizing made-in-Canada manufacturing and supply chains. We should no longer send 3/4 of our defense capital spending to America.
How will that happen? Well, a recent RBC report estimated that of the 586 defense firms operating in Canada in 2022, 408 were Canadian-owned and based, so you can expect a focus on working with them.
So we're going to see a good view of the integration area.
On working with the likes of MDA Space, a Canadian space technology firm.
So what you see there is the body of the Chorus satellite.
In the defense world, MDA satellites can, for example, detect and track ships that might be in places they aren't supposed to be, even if their transponders are turned off. You could find a ship that is fishing in waters where it's not
Illegal
supposed to be.
fishing is one of the key applications.
Commercially, they can be used for disaster management, like floods. Those commercial contracts have been critical. How quickly could you ramp up to meet demands if a bunch of that money came your way?
We're in a good place because of the factory we're putting together.
That new factory to be ready by the end of 2025. MDA seems ready for growth. Mike Greenlee is the CEO.
We're putting an extension on our factory in Montreal so that we can move from 1 satellite a week this year to 10 satellites a week, 2 per day next year.
Does that mean that you've already received new contracts, though? I mean, in order for that money to be spent, doesn't it have to speed up?
Yes, I would think so. And then if we're going to deal with speed, we have to look at the procurement processes and the workflows that government folks follow to allow them to partner with Canadian industry earlier and sign a contract faster than taking the normal 5 or 6 years it would take to work through the entire process.
5 or 6 years, they've got till the end of March.
Yes.
Speed also matters because Canada isn't the only country upping defense spending. That competition will drive the price of everything up, and in this climate, countries that are buying have demands.
As a space company in Canada that has a large defense presence, I'm being asked these days how I can move manufacturing from Canada to other countries because they're trying to figure out how a larger, more capable sovereign capability, and could I build some space equipment in their country towards their needs.
Prophetic words because this is a fickle business. Just days after we had this conversation, MDA lost a $1.8 billion contract in the United States and lost it to Elon Musk's SpaceX. Contracts from outside Canada are critical in the defense industry here. Recent figures suggest Canada exports about half of what it makes. More than 60% of that goes to the US. 12% goes to the Middle East and Africa. Consider a company like GDLS, General Dynamics, building light armored vehicles.
These vehicles can travel typically around 100 kilometers an hour.
It's an American firm with a huge Canadian presence and hundreds of Canadian workers and supplies. Tires from Eastern Canada, for example, ribbon mesh from Ontario.
But we always try to have a Canadian aspect to it.
So as Dave Haggerty, the Vice President for the Global Supply Chain, maintains, they're ready to do more work for Canada, but also say there's no firm indication GDLS will be a part of the new money being promised.
It's been a struggle the last 5 or 6 years. Certainly the work that we've had for Canada, we are very grateful for. But ideally as well, we're also looking for new contracts and new orders all the time.
So when you haven't had those in the last 5 or 6 years, for example, as a business, what do you do?
Exports is a big component of our business here in London.
So you've had to basically go elsewhere for business?
We have.
There are several contracts due to expire this year. Without more lockdown soon, the union says layoffs could happen. So if the government came to you today and said, okay, we've got a contract with you already, we're going to double it, how long would it take for you to deliver those extra vehicles?
We would start work right away.
Canada may say it wants to spend more and speed up, but what is taking so long?
Bigger in financial magnitude?
David Perry, the defense budget expert, has some ideas. What makes it hard to spend this much money? Because it sounds like an inviting prospect to get a shot at spending this much.
A few things. I mean, we haven't had enough money for defense for a very long time, so we've created this whole structure about making sure we get the biggest bang out of every single buck we're trying to spend. A whole lot of process, a lot of double, triple, some cases basically quadruple checking.
You're talking about wading through bureaucratic mud, it sounds like.
Yeah, like a field of bureaucratic mud.
Another complication, the very office now charged with speeding all this up is still trying to staff up. They also need to hire more people to help them hire more people.
They need to hire more people to hire more people and hire more people to buy things faster.
Fixing all this somehow is now the responsibility of a new Defense Procurement Agency, or DPA, headed by a Secretary of State, Stephen Fuhr.
To meet the moment, to move at the speed of relevance, we have to go faster.
Faster is imperative, not just to spend the increased budget, but to avoid getting yesterday's technology tomorrow.
Technology is changing so fast, and our procurement system is so long. So as we see things changing so quickly and we take, 5, 6, 7, 10 years to deliver a major capital project, you can see how that's problematic. DPA will make things a lot faster, and I'll give you one great example we just announced. We're going to procure submarines. So contract award initially was 2028, subs in the water by 2035. I think we can get to contract award much, much faster.
But Minister, why are we talking about buying diesel submarines that can only stay at the bottom of the ocean for a few weeks when other countries are buying autonomous vehicles that can stay under much longer and work towards the future? That's what I mean by yesterday's tech.
You need to do both. If you have an A category, first class, world class military, you do both those things.
There are no submarine manufacturers in Canada, but Fuhr echoes Carney's promise to build up the industrial base here when possible. So that building for defense is also building for the economy.
Before now, 75 cents of every dollar that Canada spent went south of the border. We're going to be doing that differently. If we can spend it in Canada without affecting the timeline too much, we're going to do that.
That's good news for Canada's defense companies and possibly this country's bottom line. But time matters. The government is also promising more money to secure Canada's north. After the break, come with us to the Arctic Circle to see firsthand what needs protecting. Securing Canada's Arctic was a big focus on the election campaign trail in the spring. So that's where we went, to hear directly from the people on the front lines of Canada's north.
Welcome on now to the 67th Annual Muskrat Derby here at the river.
These are the true and forever keepers of Arctic security and sovereignty. And for the anxious talk in Canada of what geopolitical dangers lurk over the horizon, this moment is sheer joy.
Go, 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 go.
The Spring Jamboree in Inuvik, Northwest Territories, a few hundred kilometers north of the Arctic Circle. Days of races and games on the frozen Mackenzie River. And more fun than most people have ever had playing musical chairs in the arena.
Go grab a man!
It's a strong community with rightfully strong opinions about how to secure the North.
Every decision that's made in the Arctic should happen in the Arctic by Arctic people.
Thank you!
I grew up in an era where my grandmothers were like, are the Russians seriously coming? That's what the old ladies would talk about. And I think having the military presence will give a sense of security for those in the Arctic.
What is it like during an election campaign to see would-be prime ministers standing at a podium talking about the Arctic?
Useless. Sorry, but useless. I just find they think we're just a little dot. They try to say they're going to help us and things are getting worse.
I mean, they're trying to get votes. And I might be dead wrong, but we've had lots of promises up here. We're going to do this and we're going to do that.
Well, you've got evidence of promises unfulfilled.
I'm not trying to sound like a backwood redneck hick, but that's what they do. They promise you the moon and give you dirt.
People here understand that all across the north there are signs of unfulfilled promises.
The development of Port Nanisivik.
A deepwater port in Nanisivik, for example, pledged by the Harper government in 2007, lies unfinished and so far unusable. Keep an eye on Inuvik. This community of just over 3,000 is one of the places identified by the Trudeau Liberal government for operational support hubs. And head down the highway to the furthest north you can drive in Canada, the even smaller community of Tuktoyaktuk, right on the Arctic Ocean. Conversations about threats here look like a lot of things. Not many of them are about enemy nations. To you, what's a threat to life here?
It's probably something happening to the land or to the water. It means everything to us. And if you want to know what Arctic sovereignty means to me, it's the people who live in the north. We've always been here. We've been a part of Canada, and we always will be.
And without addressing climate change, living here will get tougher. Those are the threats most of the Inuvialuit need addressing. But for the Canadian government and military, more immediate is that heightened security threat. Tuktoyaktuk was one of the places to host Operation Nanook this past winter. The largest Arctic exercise Canada and its allies have held here in nearly 2 decades. But hardly the first time Tuktoyaktuk has been at the sharp end of worries. Look at these old radar installations. These are part of the DEW line, the distant early warning line that was built after the Second World War. The purpose of that was to detect enemy bombers coming up over the pole. It's old technology. It was retired in the 1980s and replaced with something new. But even that is out of date because the threats keep evolving. Canada's modernization of surveillance, though, hasn't been fast, and its military spending not sufficient for the likes of Rob Hubert.
We see DND desperately trying to push the government to do more stuff, including the purchase of the F-35s, but nothing is done.
Hubert is one of Canada's leading experts on Arctic threats, and he doesn't mince words.
If nuclear war is to occur between the major powers, and particularly the Americans and the Soviets/Russians, it is because something has gone wrong in the Arctic.
When you say that to people, what is the response you get from them?
Most people don't realize just how dangerous everything has become.
To get a sense of the risk, visually shift the way you look at Canada. From the globe with the Arctic at the top, spin it. Now with the Arctic at the center, what do you see? Finland, Sweden, Norway, Greenland, Canada, and the US, all effectively facing Russia and its growing threat. From 2007 on, Russia reopened 50 closed Soviet-era military sites and built a series of new airfields and bases. This is the Rogachevo Air Base, for example. What it looked like in 2006, not much there. Same place, 2022. CBC News' visual investigation team determined these are parking and storage areas for missile transporters and reload packs. Right here, you can see from the shadows, the missile launchers are raised. Russia's investments are huge, its actions provocative, buzzing American fighters near Alaska in September of 2024. But it's not just Russia. Consider China, not an Arctic nation, but interested in the shipping routes of a warming Arctic Ocean, a polar Silk Road. What else does it want?
Are they going to develop submarines that have under ice capability? They're introducing 3 new classes of subs. And so the question is, are any of these being given a capability that all of a sudden they could show up in Arctic waters?
Understanding the Chinese threat is harder because there's often secrecy around China's ambitions. But people talk, and in the north, they keep their eyes open.
I'm aware the Canadian government had to remove some Chinese acoustic mirrors that are in my backyard, as I always refer to it as.
Where were those removed from, and when was that?
I can't say exactly where they were.
Okay.
They were removed last year.
Dwayne Smith is the chair of the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation, which manages the land claim agreement for this area. This, for him, is the moment for Canada's government to step up even more.
I don't think people actually realize how large this country is. To have a community of 80 people on an island the size of France, those people are on the front of what it means to be Canadian, but to represent Canada's sovereignty.
Smith and this Inuvik community know the conversation happening now is especially frenzied because of the election and because of Donald Trump. That's both frustrating and yet important, especially if it means the people who've long stood on guard for Canada find themselves getting the support they've long needed. Will those promises be fulfilled, and will Canada really be able to spend billions more on such a tight timeline?
I will believe it when I see it.
Our senior reporter on defense and security joins us next. Is it even possible to spend this much money on this timeline? We sat down with our senior defense correspondent, Murray Brewster, who's been thinking about defense procurements for years, even during the lean ones. So, Murray, Minister Furey says, okay, the government is on track to spend $8.7 billion of new money by the end of March. What do you think?
I will believe it when I see it. I've covered a number of defense policies and a number of announcements with all promises, but this one does have money behind it, $8.7 billion. The problem is that some of that money is set aside for salaries. Some of that money is set aside for Ukraine. The Prime Minister has said that the rest of the money is basically foundational, meaning it's there to build bases. It's there to build up the training system. It's there to do a whole bunch of things that the military hasn't done for decades. So I think those are really important points. But the other aspect is that I really don't think that the public, nor even some of the officials in Ottawa, have actually gotten used to the idea that what the government wants to do is actually defense production, because they want to involve Canadian industry, they want to build up Canadian industry. And right now, all they do is defense procurement. They go out and buy stuff.
We're talking about particulars, but what is the vision for Canada's military? Do you have a sense of what that is yet?
I don't think we have a vision for what we expect the Canadian military to do. For decades, we have talked about the Canadian military as being peacekeepers, but we had the Afghan war where they were warfighters. There's been a great focus on forest firefighting. So that vision has not been necessarily articulated. And they're in the process of rewriting the defense policy. We'll have to see what that says. But before you go shopping, you're going to have to know what you want to buy. And you're going to have to know the equipment and capabilities and the number of people that you're going to have to operate what you're buying.
Okay, you can't buy the food without knowing the meal.
That's right.
All right, Murray Brewster, thank you.
Thanks.